Hey guys, welcome to a very special episode from Epic Footnote Productions. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zach.
This are our favorite albums of 2020. Well, you know that. You clicked on the picture. You clicked on the episode.
They don't know. They might not read it.
They got the picture. I mean, unless you get it delivered in some way that I don't know about. But yeah, you clicked it, listening to it. So first and foremost, thank you. But yeah, every year we try to recap our favorite albums of the past year. And this year is going to be no different. I mean, obviously this year was a lot of different, but that doesn't change the fact that, you know, we still had some good music released this year, and we want to really recap those albums that we felt like kind of encapsulated our year. What were we really listening to? What were we really feeling? And, you know, getting your guys' feelings on it as well. Zach?
Well, I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, this is definitely not like every other year. A lot of things didn't happen, to put it nicely.
Yes.
But I think the saving grace was, while there's some bands who decided to wait until the next year to release new music, there was a ton of bands who were like, you know what? No, now more than ever, fans need something to cheer them up. And I think a lot of bands stood up to the challenge and really delivered. You know, in some cases, like I'm looking at my list, in some cases, these acts released their best work to date this year, despite everything that was going on. So I think without further ado, Matt, do you want to share your five first?
Yeah, let me kick this thing off here. So no particular order in any of these. Maybe the last one I'm going to say is my album of the year. So I'll just leave that one till last.
Okay.
First and foremost, you and I, we both went to the premiere, quote unquote, of Metallica's S&M 2 when it came out in movie theaters. And because the album was technically released this year, I feel like Metallica did a great job of, you know, kind of reliving what they did 20 years ago, but then, you know, taking it up a notch, you know, bringing the orchestra world into the world of Metallica, covering, you know, some orchestral favorites on I believe it was the second side of the vinyl, or was it the second vinyl on the first side, one of them, where it was just a lot of orchestral songs that they did. So I think they did a great job there in incorporating some of the new songs that they've recorded since they did S&M originally, like The Day That Never Comes, The Unforgiven 3, Moth into Flames. So there was some really great updates on here, and I feel like it was one of the stronger releases of the year. So that is album number one for me. Number two
live
is just
album. I'm surprised.
It was. Yes. I mean, it's S&M, it's Metallica. And I got to hear one of my favorite Metallica songs done again, because normally they don't play it. I think the last time I heard them do it live, it was on the Saint Anger tour when they were out with Godsmack. The song that I'm actually thinking of is No Leaf Clover. Jesus, it's one of my favorites, and I completely botched the name.
Even on Saint Anger.
No, it wasn't, but they played it, and they played a recording of the orchestra, and then then Metallica actually played it.
I actually saw that on tour too during that year. That was really cool.
Right. So that I thought was really awesome. And then for them obviously to play it again, because they're with the orchestra, so it just brings it all back together. So, you know, I really like that part of it. So that's why S&M 2 is on here. Next one is just a really fun album. It's Newfound Glory. Forever Times Infinity. It was just a really fun Newfound Glory album. It was really good. A lot of the songs kind of take me back to what Newfound Glory was, you know, back when younger me was getting into pop punk, and how much of an influence that Newfound Glory had on me at that time. And then we got to talk to Cyrus earlier this year, so that was really fun. So if you didn't catch that episode, make sure you go back and listen to both episodes that we did with Cyrus. But yeah, this album was just a really fun Newfound Glory album. I think it was probably one of the most listened to pop punk albums that I was listening to this year, so that's why I'm putting it on my list. Number 3, I'm going to go with something that probably nobody who's listening to this podcast ever would listen to. I've talked about a band in the past called Riverside, and they are one of my favorite bands, and they're out of Poland, and they just have this great progressive sound to them. And their lead man, I'm going to screw his name up and I apologize, Marysis Duda. Mariuszdudda. So that's how you say that's how you spell his name, but I can't pronounce it for the life of me, so I apologize. But he has another side project called Lunatic Soul. This is a very experimental side project. The whole concept that he has behind this side project is the cycle of life and death. In each album, it's another piece along the wheel of that circle. So he released another album this year called Through Shaded Wood. And this album, he says that it's being our worst traumas and nightmares. This is going through these woods, symbolizing and facing the traumas and nightmares. It's a test of courage. Musically, we're going on a journey inspired by dark Scandinavian and Slavic folk. And this album, to me, is really an encompassment of 2020 in a nutshell. Listening to this, if you don't feel something by it, whether it's fear or maybe some sort of release because somebody else feels the way that you feel, I really don't know if you are meant to listen to this type of music. But to me, this album just spoke so many volumes to me. The album is 6 tracks, but then you get into the deluxe edition, which is 9 tracks, and the deluxe edition has a 27-minute long song on it. So this is not for the faint of listening. The shortest song on the album is like 4 minutes, and then the longest song is 9 minutes, 53 seconds. So if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for something where there's a lot of talent and a lot of meaning in it and a lot of concept, you need to check this out. And if you go to their website, they have a whole explanation of the cycle of life and death and what all these albums mean. So very interesting if you want to get into it. But Lunatic Soul and Through Shaded Woods is my number 3 album of the year. The 4th album is really the comeback album of the year. Hands down, no other questions to ask. It's AC/DC.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hold on. Really? Because if you listen to a past episode of 2 Minutes to Review where we review this album, you kind of, I mean, we both liked it, but I think we both kind of were like, yeah, all right. Like, I'm surprised that it made it to your top 5.
Yeah, see, the reason why is because, like I said, it's the comeback album of the year, in my opinion. But it also becomes one of the albums of the year, just based on the merit that we can say that it's the greatest comeback album of the year, because it has to be a great album. And yes, we did say it's okay, it's good, but come on, it's AC/DC, and AC/DC on a bad day is greater than a lot of people on their best day.
Wow. Okay.
Even though some people are going to criticize and they're going to say, well, AC/DC always sounds the same, man. Well, you know what? Who cares? It's AC/DC. You know what you're getting with them. And would AC/DC be as great as they are if they didn't have their signature sound? Probably not. A lot of people would poo-poo on them for, kind of trying something different. And I alluded to this in my review, that they're the greatest example of that catch-22 of a band being stuck in their ways and we want them to change. But if they change, well, why don't they sound like the AC/DC that I remember? Go back to being those guys, man. Pay back in black, man. So it's like, you know what? What are you going to do? It's AC/DC. You know what you're getting. And for them to sound as good as they did on here without Malcolm, with Brian Johnson coming back off of hearing loss, I think they did a great job. Being a little critical in the review, but overall this year, I think they did one of the best jobs out of all the albums that I, was listening to this year and kind of what came out. That's number 4.
Wow. Okay.
Number 5. This is, I think, the band of 2020 and the album of 2020. When they said that they were going to do a new album, I kind of was like, all right, whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm not really a huge fan. But listening to the album and just reliving what I thought I couldn't relive with a band, coming from a younger me, feeling something from the early works and then kind of getting lost when they just started releasing albums. It's like, later albums, it's like, all right, whatever, you guys are kind of losing your way. And, they went down like a dark road and they really weren't the same band. But now the focus has come back. And this album was a perfect mixture of old school Deftones, new school Deftones, and
Wow.
just being this mix of an album. This when an album kind of grabs you and you feel like you're listening to something special, that's what this album is. Deftones Ohms, in my opinion, the album of 2020. And also, when I say that it was the band's year, they released the 20th anniversary of White Pony, and then the subsequent companion album, Black Stallion. I feel like the Deftones, this year was the year that they could do no wrong, and like I said, in years past, they did a whole bunch of wrong. There was a lot of albums I didn't like.
It's funny you say that. You say that they couldn't do any wrong. Well, Stephen Carpenter done revealed himself to be a anti-vaxxer or flat earther, which is funny because when that came out, I'm like,
we're not talking.
No, we're not talking politics, but I'm just laughing because I love that album too, and that may or may not be on my final five. But as soon as that came out, I'm like, God dang it! I finally just got back into the Deftones.
Yeah, you can't really silence somebody and some of the dumb things that are going to fly out of their mouth, whether or not it's his belief, whatnot. I don't care. It's still
you
like,
have to keep it separate.
Keep it away from the music.
Yeah,
I'm trying to just focus musically here. So
no, it's fair.
Outside of him, just focusing on the Deftones and Ohms and Black Stallion. The Deftones, I think, were the band of 2020, and Ohms perfectly captures, I think, what a perfect album in 2020 could sound like.
Awesome. You know what? So let me get into my five, and let me start off with the album that we both share on our list.
Okay.
As you mentioned, Deftones, Ohms. Again, I joked that like I got a little like, oh, come on. Just as I was getting back into the Deftones, Stephen Carpenter had to open up his mouth. God damn it. But the truth of the matter is I was not expecting to be so blown away by Ohms. It really was such a refreshing album from a band that really did sound reinvigorated, that really did sound like they were finally back even into just being interested, let alone into their prime. It just was such a phenomenal hard rock album. 5 years ago, if you had told me that one of my favorite albums of a year was going to be from the Deftones, I would have been like, yeah, right. What happened? Did I drink the Kool-Aid or something? And you know what? This year I kind of did. I'm not saying I'm completely dedicated to the cult of Chino, but I get it now. I get the appeal. Like it was really a superb, well done album. So that's to kick off the start. And you know what? Listen to our review of 2 minutes review on that album to really get a deeper understanding of our love-hate relationship with Deftones past, as well as our absolute love of the new album. But that's definitely my top five. Coming up next, again, in also no order, there is a band that I have been in love with now for a few years called Nothing But Thieves. They're from the UK. And the best way to explain them is if Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine decided to hire the touring band of Nine Inch Nails to record and produce a kick-ass rock album. If you love Muse but wish that the band wouldn't go too off the deep end of trying to be like Queen meets Radiohead, if they kind of just stuck to hysteria level of awesome rock, Nothing But Thieves is the band for you. Their singer is just unbelievable, the range that he has. And they released a new album called Moral Panic. And it's a little bit more on the, I don't want to say dance side, but like there's definitely a little bit more electronic elements to it than some of the past stuff like Broken Machine, which came out a few years ago. The title track is amazing. The song Phobia, it just kind of goes all over the map as to like different genres within literally 3 minutes. And even just this, one of the lead singles, Everybody Going Crazy, kind of just captured the mood of 2020 so perfectly. The feeling of isolation and the feeling of needing others at a time when we can't really be of others. I really, really strongly suggest you check out the band Nothing But Thieves, and I think Moral Panic is a good place to start with if you are not familiar with them. Moving on, I want to talk about a band from a legacy act at this point. And the excitement for their new album to come out was already pretty high up. But who would have thought that it would have came out even at a better point? I'm talking about Pearl Jam's Gigaton. I really suggest you listen to our episode 2 minutes to review where we review this album. But long story short, Pearl Jam come back in true great form. It came out in March, right around the time when we were all going into lockdown, when we were trying to figure out even what to call this virus, let alone how to handle it, where paranoia was at a all-time high. And they really kind of helped gave us music to calm us down when we needed it, especially because at that point, it wasn't even clear if many bands were going to be able to release new music, let alone just do anything. So kind of a needed moment when that album came out. So thank you, Pearl Jam, as always, for being there. And Super Blood Wolf Moon still rocks. It's just still a great song. Next, fourth album on my list is coming from quite possibly the best metal supergroup of the past decade. I am talking about Killer Be Killed, who gave us the nicest surprises when they revealed, oh yeah, we recorded a whole new album back in 2019, and here we go, we're going to release it. Their second album, Reluctant Hero, finds Max Cavalera from Soulfly Sepultura, Troy Sanders of Mastodon, and Greg of Dillinger Escape Plan fame coming back and possibly releasing an even better album than their first one, the self-titled that came out a few years ago. And it takes all the elements that you love about those bands and times it by 10 to make it even better. And I actually think the reason why, I'm sorry, backtrack. I always called this band the three tenors of metal because the three of their voices, Troy, Max, and Greg, their vocals should not work so well on a single song, and yet it does. And this album is even better. But the real secret ingredient as to why this album is so good is because of drummer Ben Collar. I am literally obsessed with his drumming on this album. He goes from all different kind of like just styles of playing, from tribal to speed to punk. You know Ben from Mutoid Man, from Converge. He is just the go-to underground drummer, but he's even downplaying how great of a drummer he is. And this album, he just elevates the band. And Dream Gone Bad has become my official wrestling theme song if I ever decide to go into wrestling. So I can't hype up this album enough. You really need to check out Reluctant Hero if you even like rock, let alone all the bands that are involved in this project. So that's possibly my favorite heavy metal album of the year. But if I had to name the album of the year for me, it's my fifth pick, and it's Run the Jewels RTJ4. I won't go too much more deep into it. Listen to our 2 minutes to review episode where we review this album, but it really was the album that came out at the perfect time. It was at the height of racial tensions and injustice, kind of not that it came back and went away, but that it kind of popped its ugly head back up again. And this album just spoke to that so well. And then on top of that, just LP and Killer Mike are just so on top of their game on this record again. And it's just another example of why Run the Jewels are probably one of the most important duos in music, not just in hip hop or rap, but in music. Just kind of like how I needed Gigaton to listen to when it came out as it did, I needed RTJ4 when it came out when it did. And it's still, even like a few months after going back to it, it's just still an incredible piece of work. So to recap, and I'm going to have you recap yours, Matt, but for me, it was Deftones, Ohms, Nothing But Thieves, Moral Panic, Pearl Jam's Gigaton. I'm assuming that I pronounced that correctly because we made fun of myself for messing that title up numerous times in that review. Killer Be Killed, Reluctant Hero, and Run the Jewels, RTJ4. And Matt, recap yours.
So mine is Deftone Ohms. We have Newfound Glory, Forever and Ever Times Infinity, Metallica SNM2, AC/DC's Power Up, and Lunatic Soul Through Shaded Woods.
Now, Matt, I'm curious because there really was a lot of good music that came out this year. Were there any albums that almost made your top five that you kind of want to give a little like honorary mention to?
It would have to be Pearl Jam. I mean, for some reason, I just can't get into Pearl Jam as much as I used to. And they did go off in a different direction this time, which was kind of controversial. Dance of the Clairvoyants, that's it. When that came out and everybody heard the very electronic sound of Pearl Jam, it was kind of like, well, what's going on? You know, why does this sound like this? Why does it not sound like the Pearl Jam that we know? Why don't they sound like 10? Once again, kind of goes to what I was talking about AC/DC. You know, people complain when they don't sound the same. People complain when they change, you know, but it's like you can't ever win. But, you know, it was a great album nonetheless. It just wasn't one of my favorites. And then Run the Jewels, once again, not one of my favorites. I do recognize, and you'll hear this if you go back and listen to the review that we did on the prior episode, but you'll hear, you know, my thoughts and feelings on the album in its entirety. And like you kind of alluded to, it was kind of the perfect album at the perfect time, and it felt right. It felt right when it came out. I really kind of gravitated to it from that perspective. Is it something that I listened to all this year? No.
Fair
Do
enough.
I recognize it for its greatness? Yes. So that's why I kind of have to give that an honorable mention. What about you?
I actually have a few. So first off, I think Code Orange proved that they are the real deal this year. Not only with their album Underneath, which kind of just further showed that they went from their extreme hardcore sound to just literally a cluster of like every like industrial, even some elements of new metal, just like literally becoming Nine Inch Nails meets Ministry meets Godflesh meets hardcore 101. Like they just all over the gambit. But also a few months later, they released the acoustic live album Under the Skin. And I also really appreciate everything that Code Orange did this year in regards to the live streaming aspects of live streaming concerts, and just kind of creating content during a time that they really couldn't do much. And part of that was when they decided to do like an unplugged style show, where they took some of their songs and just stripped it down a little bit. And it really showed how versatile Code Orange is even further. Just some of these songs that might just sound kind of crazy on the original versions, the stripped down version showed there was a lot more to them. And they even did a really great cover of Down in a Hole by Alice in Chains. Code Orange just again proved that they really, all the hype that's been around about them, it's worth every single word. I also got to give a shout out to Trivium, who released What the Dead Men Say right at the height of the pandemic. It was great to talk to Paulo earlier this year about the album, and I think I agree that it really saw Trivium continue on the upward path of releasing some reliably great metal anthems. Also loved Carcass's EP, the Despicable EP. I don't normally like to include EPs in my final lists of albums, but literally Carcass is the best melodic death metal band out there, and this EP just proves it. Just
Well, that's why
right
this
there
is
then.
honorable mentions, because you can
Exactly.
do that now.
And then I also always loved Protest the Hero, and I think they released a really great album again of Polympists. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but if you want some really amazing operatic prog metal, you gotta check out Protest the Hero, and they're always reliable, and this album just continues that trend. But then I also want to include a live album. So there is this singer-songwriter called LP. You might know the song Lost on You that she wrote and recorded, that became kind of an international hit. And she's constantly releasing some really great, reliable pop records. Kind of have a little folk element to it. It's kind of hard to explain her genre style, but she released a live album called Live in Moscow that just sounds great. You just feel like you're there and hearing her play. She's got just a unique, great voice and a unique approach to songwriting. And I think Live in Moscow is a really great place for someone to start if they want to discover who LP is. And that's L, the letter L, and P. So like as if it's a vinyl. She's phenomenal. And I think every time she comes up with something, me and my wife are just going go gaga. It's like, oh my God, yes, she's back. So those are some honorable mentions. But now, Matt, what disappointed you album wise? I was about to say, what disappointed you about 2020? I'm sure we can think of a bunch, but from a new
That's
music,
a loaded question.
yeah, but from a new music perspective, what was disappointing?
There's only really like there was a lot that I listened to. Not really with 2020. I'll say this: there's not too much that can disappoint me because this year and everything that's happened this year and the way that things have just run this year, you have to be kind of like a standout on a lower level to be disappointing, you know, if that makes sense to anybody but me. The only thing off the top of my head that was really disappointing was Ozzy.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. Why? Because I can pinpoint what disappointed me in that album, but I want to hear what you were disappointed in. I also have two albums that apparently I'm just a jaded asshole because I do have some other albums that disappointed me. But what about Ozzy disappointed you most?
So with Ozzy, I mean, when Ozzy said he was going to do a new album, especially after saying, you know, the no more tours and kind of the way that, you know, all of that kind of went down this past year or over the past couple of years, you know, he's I'm not going on the road. I'm going to be doing new music. Okay, well, that's fine. Well, when they were talking about doing Ordinary Man, it was really kind of like a stretch to pull him into the studio. I can't even remember the name of the person who produced the album.
Andrew Watts, who also played guitar.
That's the guy that I'm thinking of. So the story goes that Andrew Watts wanted to pull Ozzy into do an album, and that he was going to do, I forget how much work to get people together to get this album running and get something out, because he really wanted to, do something with Ozzy. And then you have a very, very lackluster song in Under the Graveyard.
You see, I liked that song.
Uh,
Here's the thing. Well, real quick, because
Yeah.
I actually liked the songs on the album. There was a few I'm like, okay, that's just really piss poor. That was lazy. The musicianship on the rhythm section, I mean, you had Duff McKagan and Chad Smith playing bass and drums respectively.
Correct.
And it was such a tight, from a rhythm point, it was the tightest Ozzy had sounded. What drove me kind of nuts was nothing against Andrew Watts' guitar capabilities. It's clear that he is a studio session player and not live. You need someone who can be a virtuoso soloist like Zakk Wylde on an Ozzy record, not someone who's trying to sound like an overproduced Tony Iommi, which is what Andrew Watts did on that album.
This is what I felt like with him on guitar. It's like, I just want to be an Ozzy guitarist because I love Ozzy, and I have access to get Ozzy. Well, that really leads to some. No matter how tight the rhythm section is, they can completely blow you away. But when you hear a solo, like what he was able to play on this album,
that's a stretch saying it's playing, but yeah.
it feels like I have so much talent and potential, and then it just drops off a cliff.
Yeah.
You're only as strong as your weakest link, and he was clearly the weakest link in the chain on this album. And
yeah, which is saying a lot, because Ozzy can't really sing anymore without a lot of Pro Tools. That's another sad truth.
Yes, but for him being Pro Tooled up as much as he was, he didn't sound terrible.
Oh no, he didn't sound terrible at all. Not at all.
But the songs and the lyrics, and some of them were kind of like, let's call a spade here. He said, I think on one of the songs, he's going to make you defecate yourself.
Yeah, no, that was a terrible song.
Like, come on.
I will say this: if this was the last Ozzy record, and I think we talked about this when we reviewed it in the 2 Minutes Review episode, I'll be okay with it, because it's definitely better than some of the stuff he's released, like in Ordinary, when he did Scream, or when he did Black Rain. However, the thing that kills me about it is that I just can't help but imagine how much better it would sound if they had brought Zakk Wylde or even Gus G back to the guitars. If they had just got a different guitarist, it probably would have been a 10 times better album.
Is it better to burn out or to fade away? That's kind of the question you have to ask with this album. Is it better for Ozzy just to, keep his legacy intact and then just not put anything else out and maybe tour every now and again and just play the hits? Or do you really want to try to just force it and burn yourself out trying to just put out new music that somebody's actually going to care about? I'm not going to lie, trying to getting Post Malone on here, I feel like is trying to get a new audience into Ozzy. And, when
it worked.
When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it really doesn't.
No, but here's why it worked, because my nephews who are, teen nephews who otherwise wouldn't really give Ozzy the time of day now like Ozzy because they heard how awesome he was on the Post Malone songs.
But they're on.
So it worked right there. It worked.
Malone's songs, not on Ozzy songs.
No, fair. I do want to. So that actually, I even thought of a third album that disappointed me this year. Apparently, I'm really just a jaded asshole. Green Day's album, Father of All.
Remember this year?
Yeah, that's how long of a year it's been.
I completely forgot about that. Oh my God, was that a bad album?
Let's save ourselves some time and headaches. Just listen to our review of 2 Minutes to Review to hear why we were very disappointed in that album, because you just listen to that review, because it was a bad album. Okay. And just such a half-assed record.
That falls definitely in line with my kind of notation before this segment of how bad you have to be. And I even forgot it came out this year. So
it was bad. It was a bad album. Also very disappointed. And it's funny, a lot of lists, end of year lists, have named it in the top 5. Lamb of God's self-titled album. Again, listen to our 2 Minutes to Review episode to hear what we really thought of it in more in depth. But it wasn't that it was bad. It was just very boring. You can tell that the only person who was into it while recording the album was their new drummer, which is ironic. It just was not the invigoration that I want from a Lamb of God album.
just a boring album.
It's just boring.
Like, it's not to the level bad of like Green Day
Yeah.
Ozzy, in my opinion, but just a very boring album from Lamb of
God.
God.
I don't know why everyone's been raving about it. But then last, real quick, and it's funny because it's going to sound like I'm giving it a compliment before I trash it. Mr. Bungle is the band that Mike Patton fronted before joining Faith No More. And this year they reunited to re-record their original Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny EP. And they actually enlisted Scott Ian and Dave Lombardo to play on it, and to kind of as a reformed version of Mr. Bungle with the 3 original members as well, including Mike Patton. Now, in their defense, they released quite possibly the best thrash metal album of 2020. Hands down, definitely an incredible thrash album. So then why am I saying it's a disappointing album? Well, here's the problem. What I loved about Mr. Bungle was how insanely weird and all over the place they were. You listen to their self-titled debut, it's circus music meets opera meets metal meets a little bit of punk meets surf rock. Like literally within one song, it could be all different genres and then still somehow be a melodic, beautiful piece of work. That's what I want from Mr. Bungle. If they had named this re-recording, the Raging Wrath re-recording, Stormtroopers of Death, Scott Ian's band, which actually was a huge influence on Mr. Bungle, I would have probably had this in my top 5. But I don't want a straightforward thrash metal metal album from Mr. Bungle. I want weird. I want all over the place. I want even just Mike Patton singing, where this is just more screaming. So it's just disappointing in that, like, if it was any other band, this would be in my top 5. But because you put the name Mr. Bungle on it, it did not meet my expectations of bizarre that they should have delivered on. That's just my opinion.
Maybe I should have actually listened to this the way that you're describing it, because we talked about this, that we were going to do a review on the Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, but you're not a huge fan of them.
Right, exactly. And I said, you know what? No. I said, I'm not going to be able to give you a fair review because I don't like Mr. Bungle. I actually hate Mr. Bungle for many of the reasons that you just stated. I remember the first time that I ever heard Mr. Bungle, I was in college at my college radio station, and I heard the Air Conditioned Nightmare, and I was like, what the hell am I listening to? This is probably one of the worst things I've ever heard, and people like this.
Oh, and I love it.
You're right. And people either really, really love it and will defend it to death, or really, really hate it, like myself, and want to know what the hell are you really. And maybe we should do an Am I Missing Something on this, because I have no clue what the hell I'm missing, because I can't seem to get into this at all. And now that you're telling me that this album was recorded and it's like thrash, maybe I'm on board.
You know what? I was about to say 2 things. One, I think we should do an Am I Missing Something episode in the new year, because I know a bunch of my friends who would be happy to be special guests on this to back me up on this, because I swear I'm not alone in this. But also, I actually do think you would love Raging Wrath. And like I said, it's a great thrash record, but I just am spoiled because no, this is not what I want from Mr. Bungle. I want carousel music. I want a song like Egg. Like I want like stuff that isn't really metal, but it's metal. Like that kind of music. And this is just, no, this is straight thrash metal. I'm like, oh, if this was like Dead Cross, which is the project Dave Lombardo and Mike Patton are doing, if it was like that title in this album, it would be in my top 5. You put a name like Mr. Bungle and you don't deliver. It still irks me. And I can't get past that from really enjoying the album, which is really disappointing because it is a great thrash album. But anyway, that was 2020 in a nutshell. What did you think, other than all of the crazy disasters that happened this year, to, again, put it mildly? What albums resonated with you the most during a truly challenging year? What do you wish was better, or what disappointed you? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. Matt, can you believe that we're finally at the end of 2020?
I can't, but I still feel like it should be June. Like, this is crazy that we're at the end of 2020, in my opinion. And we're still kind of where we were. I mean, we're maybe a little bit better, but, you know, it's kind of crazy that we're still kind of in this situation. But here's to a better 2021.
Yeah.
And hopefully we get better sooner rather than later. But here's to ringing out 2020 and crossing our fingers and toes that 2021 is so much better.
Fingers crossed. and see you guys in 2021. Thanks, everybody.
Later.